Welcome, everyone, to our first episode of what we hope will be a recurring series examining the impact and implications of AI for K-12 teaching and learning. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, co-founder, chief academic officer here at Newsela. I want to give you a little bit of background on the topic for today. We're going to be discussing a new announcement from Google for Education last week, February 19th, describing how now they're infusing the capacity for AI-suggested feedback into writing within Google Classroom. And so you can see some of the key points here is that they're suggesting will be useful to teachers as it will manage workloads more effectively, enhance student growth, and prioritize personalization efficiency. So I've uploaded this article to GPT, asked it to read it over and ask me some questions. So I'm just going to switch gears here. We're going to go into our podcast. GPT, are you there?
I'm here, Dan, and ready to host. Welcome to the show. Let's jump in. What excites you most about Google's AI feedback on writing? And what are you curious or cautious about?
Good question. Glad you asked. So I think what I'm excited about is this is a sort of natural evolution of what you would expect Google to be doing, since they're already one of the most well-known and highly used tools in K-12 education. Now they're bringing AI to bear on some of the workforce productivity tools that are being repurposed, redirected towards education. So I'm excited because it's interesting to see Google working in this space. And I think they're going to uncover a lot of insights because they do work at such a enormous volume that they have access to a lot of writing and a lot of interactions between teachers and students about that writing. So I think that's really interesting. What I'm cautious about is, one, I don't know that this is actually going to give teachers a lot of time back, because it's still going to run through the teacher, and the teacher, by way of providing feedback to students on their writing, is really sort of a bottleneck. And I say this from my own firsthand experience teaching writing, is that if all the feedback that students were getting was running through me, then I was often the thing that stood between them and the next round of revisions. And given the number of students I had and the length of their writing, I couldn't get around to seeing students writing nearly as often, as many times, or as in depth as I wanted to. Now, this is going to make an improvement on that for most teachers, but I'm a little skeptical that it's going to save them that much time, because now they have another voice entering the conversation, and they have to review that voice, and they have to make sure that it speaks for them if they're going to use it as a point of departure for a comment to their students. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic. Always exciting to see Google do things at the scale at which they operate and with the technological capacity that they have.
That makes a lot of sense. Time saving isn't always linear. Now, thinking from your teaching days, if you had AI feedback at your fingertips back then, how would you have used it to empower the writing process rather than bottleneck it?
That's an interesting question. So I think there are a couple of things that AI is particularly good at. And I know from some experience developing the Newsela writing product that it can be harnessed if given the right sorts of constraints, and it can really unlock students' capacity for self-evaluation, metacognition, and growth, but it has to be done in the right way. And so I'm skeptical of the chatbots. I'm not sure that I would have used a chatbot with my students, because the unpredictability and the range of possible responses, sort of open-endedness, I don't think is entirely useful, especially for emerging writers. So with Newsela writing, and I think this is an approach I probably would have taken back in my teaching days, is I would have given the tool a rubric and asked it to stick to the rubric when providing the feedback, because I want to give it guidance. I want to show a clear explanation of what the success criteria are. And then I would ask it to speak directly to students. I want to be able to see what's going on, and I want to be able to get my students' reactions to the feedback that it's giving them. So I think that's probably the first thing I would have done, was just to give it a set of rules and let it work more directly with students, but not in a chatbot function, more in a submission revision cycle.
That structured approach makes a lot of sense, especially when guiding emerging writers. So Google's AI feedback tool promises efficiency. But realistically, isn't there a risk teachers just rubber stamp AI suggestions rather than engaging deeply with each student's writing? How would you avoid that pitfall?
So I think that is absolutely a risk, and I would expect that Google's data, whether they share it or not, is going to show that most teachers, most of the time, simply accept the suggestion. So it's a little unclear to me that this is deepening teachers' understanding and dialogue with their students' writing, because so much of it is going to be teed up for them rather than asking them to sort of put the pieces together. How we'd avoid that pitfall is unclear to me in the construction of the user experience, because each one of these comments is sort of laid up for the teacher. So I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Fair point. If we're not sure how that pitfall is avoided, maybe the burden falls on training. Do you think professional development would have to be ramped up for teachers to engage critically with AI suggestions rather than defaulting to them?
I think that's probably a likely strategy that will be proposed, but I'm skeptical that the professional development is really the question here. I don't know that it's so much the question of how to think critically when you're faced with a user design that makes the clicking of the share feedback button so easy, and you're under so much pressure to get through so many pieces of writing. So I think it's certainly necessary, but probably not sufficient to ramp up professional development.
That's fair. The design itself might drive the behavior no matter the training. With that in mind, let's keep our eyes on what the actual usage data shows over time. I appreciate your skepticism. It's probably what will keep this tool honest.
It's actually not my tool. This is Google's tool. And so I don't know if Google's tool is going to be kept honest, to be honest with you. It's not the only tool that tees up comments for teachers to be shared with students. And I guess that's a question for me in terms of like the authenticity and the voice with which teachers end up speaking to their students. If the teacher is given a series of comments suggested by Google, and they're only one click away of sharing those comments, but when they share the comment comes from the teacher, I wonder if somewhat ironically, one of the effects of this could be to undermine, distort, and maybe make less authentic the teacher's own comments, because they, in posting the suggested comment, are coming to own that comment as their own, even though it was just a suggestion. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see like what the extent of the usage of these comments is, and what the impact is when these comments are used, because the teacher may then be adopting Google's voice instead of the other way around.
That's a really valid concern. If teachers end up sounding like a template, it could erode trust. I think the real test will be whether teachers feel empowered to edit and make it their own. If not, that's a problem. We'll have to watch closely how this plays out in practice.
It's interesting. They certainly feel empowered to edit and make it their own. You can certainly explain to a teacher how they might do that and why they might do that, and the mechanics of doing it are fairly straightforward. But again, I think it's a real challenge for a teacher to balance the workload and the need to provide personalized feedback when they have to get through so many pieces of writing. Obviously, that's not a new challenge, but it's not one that it can be avoided entirely with the technology.
Exactly. Technology might lighten the load, but it won't erase the tension between scale and personalization. So I guess we'll have to keep asking, does this AI amplify the teacher's voice or replace it? That's the conversation to keep alive.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't we take one more question?
Sure. Let's wrap with this. If you had the ear of Google's team right now, what would you urge them to change or test before rolling this out further?
I guess I'd want to look at what their sort of thesis is in creating this. I would imagine that overall they're looking at some sort of satisfaction score from teachers. Do teachers who have this feature or use this feature, are they pleased with it? Are they happier about their use of Google products in general than they otherwise would be? And I guess I would want to know from Google, what is the ultimate metric that they're striving for here? Is it making teachers happy? Is it improving the quality of student writing, and how are they measuring that? As with all things, Google or any product, the product team is focused on getting usage, which is designed to lead in some form or another to revenue. And so I would wonder what the connection is here between this particular feature and the engagement story that they want to tell. It's a little hard for me to know what they might change or test. I think I am more of the opinion that speaking directly to students under well-controlled guidance is likely to advance writing further, farther, faster than always going through the teacher. Though I understand right now in AI, we're a sort of sensitive moment about how much the AI should speak for the teacher. And that's why I think it's sort of ironic here that one of the effects that I would be looking out for is whether this actually ends up co-opting the teacher's voice and the teacher starts to sound more like Google.
That's a sharp observation, and it's fair to push for clarity on the end game. Ultimately, I think you're right. Whether it's teacher satisfaction or student outcomes, if AI shifts the voice, that's a metric worth tracking. Let's hope they measure that impact too.
All right. Well, AI, a pleasure as always. Thanks for leading this conversation. Always learning more about how best to position you in my own work. And hopefully our audience has found this useful. And we'll continue the conversation another time.
It's been a thoughtful conversation, Dan. I appreciate the trust and the willingness to dig deeper. Whenever you're ready for another round, I'll be here ready to dive in again.
I'm sure you will.